As with many other ethical issues that we've addressed here at the Center over the years, the controversy surrounding ChatGPT and similar innovations boils down to this. A powerful company, organization, new technology or product has the potential to satisfy the demands of millions of people to make their lives better, but also has the potential to do a lot of harm in both predictable and unpredictable ways. In the absence of existing regulations that might address the negative effects, what are the ethical obligations of those who are in a position to control the way that the new technology is used? Further, moving forward, what kinds of regulations should we push for in order to obviate its harmful effects? Remarkably, the law department here at Baruch boasts two of the country's leading experts on the law and ethics of new technologies like ChatGPT. Please welcome my colleague, Professor Nizan Packin, to an Ethics Week fireside chat on the subject, along with my other distinguished colleague, Yafit Lev-Aretz, who will act as moderator.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. I never know if it works. So thank you so much, and I want to first mention that Nizan, who is my colleague and my friend, and my co-author on many, many projects, she researches and writes about fintech and ethical implications of digital technologies in business law, consumer protection law, privacy and information law, including cybersecurity. So like almost a ChatGPT for tech policy is right here, but only with the human element of it.
No pressure, right?
Yes, no pressure at all. So today, everybody, we're going to chat about the future. Of course it drops when I say chat about the future. We will explore the legal and ethical challenges of ChatGPT and generative AI. But before we're going to dive into this brave new world of AI, I want to start by making sure that we all share some basic understanding about what generative AI is and what it does and how it works. So let's start by asking some questions. How many of you have heard of ChatGPT? Should I add prior to this event? Prior to this event. Okay, good. How many of you have used ChatGPT? Okay, so a lower number, but still very impressive. How many of you know how ChatGPT works? Oh, okay. I'm keeping my eyes on you too over there. And I saw someone in the back. Okay, another one. Very impressive. Okay, excellent, everybody. So before we continue, I want us all to take a second to appreciate this picture that you see here of a human hand meeting a human robot, which was generated by DALL-E, which is the equivalent of ChatGPT for images. So I just asked it to create a picture of a human hand shaking a robot hand. I asked for digital art, modern style, and this is what I got. So thank you, DALL-E. By the way, it is by the same company, OpenAI. And Nizan, before we start, do you remember the first time you heard about ChatGPT?
So I heard about it and I started reading about it, and then I started reading about a lot of trouble and problems that were happening in FTX, which now seems like very old news, but this
Maybe
was all,
just a word about what FTX is for.
So this may seem like a very long time ago, but up until November, it was the most famous crypto exchange business in the US, probably, and over the world, used by various people and its leaders, and Bankman-Fried, the founder and the CEO. And until November, it was considered to be a very ethical crypto company, and all of a sudden there were all these speculations going around on Twitter and on the internet, and I figured, okay, there's a new tool, I may as well ask it, what's happening with FTX? Are they in trouble? Is there something happening there? And ChatGPT responded immediately that as far as it's aware, the company's doing great. It's the best crypto exchange company out there, highly ethical, under the leadership of Sam Bankman-Fried. Of course, needless to say, the following day, Binance was about to buy it, and a day after it completely collapsed. And I was like, let me repeat that question again. And again, I got the same response. And I was like, that doesn't add up. And then I started realizing what I'm sure all of you have realized very quickly, that the information was basically up until 2021, and that this was my first sort of introduction into it's missing, which we'll be talking about a lot today, right? But the first sign of issues was timeliness, right?
Yeah. So when I tried to think about the first time I heard about ChatGPT, it was evening, and I was sitting, with my husband having a chat, and he's like, "Did you hear about this new thing? It was all over the news today, ChatGPT." And I was like, "No, what is it?" And he said, "It's really weird. Like it's an AI chat." And my husband is in IT, in a startup, and he said, "We asked it to write code, and it did an incredible job." And ChatGPT, indeed, for those of you who are in this space, know that it's very good with writing code. And yes, and Nizan, I want to ask about your personal experience with ChatGPT, and you obviously wear different hats: an educator, a parent, a researcher. So let's explore with these different hats. Tell us a little bit about your experience with ChatGPT as an educator.
So as an educator, it became very clear to me that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, that if this is so amazing in writing so many different things, my students will find out the same in like 3, 2, 1. I guess, I don't know. Yeah, okay. I figured that if it's so obvious to me that there's so much that could be done with this, it's obvious to my students like about right now. And it was towards like the middle, as I mentioned, November, towards like end of the semester, last semester. And I was like, okay, finals are coming up, papers are due. We need to do something about this like yesterday. So I realized there was a problem. I spoke about this in class, obviously trying to figure out, where do we go from here. But I don't want to talk about this too much because we have a little bit of the future of education in a few minutes. But
did you have a chance of finding any of your students using ChatGPT for like assignments?
So interestingly enough, I had someone write something very odd, and I knew that the student speaks another language, so I put that text in Google Translate, and I knew what the language was, and sure enough, it came out, perfectly done. So I realized this is something that they must have copied and pasted and used. So I just asked the student, and they said yes. I kind of did a mix of ChatGPT and Google Translate there, and a little bit of back and forth. And I was like, it's a great tool. We have no rules about it. Try to, we'll figure these out very quickly. I'm not going to do anything about this now, but we need to start preparing ourselves for whether this will be legit or not. And for now, it's okay. But try to, take this, fix all these issues, submit again.
So I had this similar experience. I gave my students an extra credit assignment, and here at Baruch we use Turnitin. It's a plagiarism software that compares whatever a student submits to whatever exists on the internet and gives you kind of a score for matching content. And I remember that when they submitted, the scores were very low for matching content on the internet. But interestingly, one thing that ChatGPT, at least the older version, didn't do well was to provide cites. So in my extra credit assignment, I asked them to provide citation lists. So I went, and each and every submission, I clicked on some of the sites and was trying to see if those are real sites. And I had 2 students whose citation list was completely fabricated. There was nothing there. And the assignments were very good, very well written. But it was obvious that this was a ChatGPT output. So I emailed both students, by the way, whom I love, but they were very slow in responding in the course of the semester. But then I emailed them that morning and I said, I have a suspicion here that you did not write this. Maybe it wasn't written by another human, but I don't think it's you. And I'm giving you 2 hours to resubmit before I consider what I should do with that. And within less than 2 hours, I had new submissions with citation lists that work, and they were completely differently written. So yeah, I think as an educator, and we're going to talk more about that when we get to our later part.
And we also had a similar experience in one of our articles that we were working on, which was a very cutting-edge issue with blockchain technology and decentralized credit scores. And it's something very specific, and we were looking for different examples. And I gave some prompts and got some answers, which were pretty great. And I was very excited. I told Yafit, we found all these different things. I'm going to ask for the sites. And I got 10 sites, and every single one was broken. And I wrote, these sites don't work. Can you send me something that does? And it said, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's something that would work. Gave me back 10 sites, each and every one, again, broken. I'm like, these are also, but I'm so sorry. I'm only a large language model. I don't really, like, okay, I got it.
Yeah, we have some stories about lies, ChatGPT lies, but we're going to share more of them later. So as a parent, Nizan, how did you use it?
I feel like my one experience as a parent has been a totally legitimate one, as an educator as well, because my daughter was going to her friend's birthday party and she didn't write anything, and she's like, she always writes the most beautiful cards to me. I said, why won't you just try something here? So she put in a name, a few of the things her friend likes, and was like, can you write a poem in a rap style with this one sentence, keeps repeating every few sentences, and it came out really nice. And she's like, oh my God, this is amazing. My friend's gonna love it, until she finds out that,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we all have funny stories about ChatGPT. By the way, anyone in the audience, do you have a funny story for us of how you use ChatGPT and how it lied to you?
Okay. This is yesterday's Wall Street Journal.
Yes. Do we have a mic? 1 second. I want everybody to hear you. Thank you.
Yesterday's Wall Street Journal, someone's looking for a job, so they posted it. They got 5 responses, and they were almost all similar. So the person looking for the, offering the position, put it in, got almost the same response as all the others. So this is something that people are really now beginning to wrestle with.
Yes, for sure. We're going to see more of that. Do I have more interesting stories you want to share about ChatGPT or DALL-E? All right.
I'll just share one quick anecdote. So now one of the most promising positions out there is someone who's like a ChatGPT whisperer, right? Like someone who's very good at prompts. And if you'll see more of that on LinkedIn or other places, don't be surprised, because that's like the most trendy search out there right now. Someone who gets what to prompt and how.
Okay, I think we forgot the clicker because we do have some things to show you. So excuse us for a second. Okay, so let's start with understanding what ChatGPT is and how it works, because the majority of our audience, I think, would appreciate this overview. So tell us, Nizan.
So basically, as I mentioned before, when I was attacking it, saying, why do you keep giving me these broken things? Do something better. And it said, oh, I'm just a large language model. So that's exactly what it is, right? So essentially, it's a large language model that is meant to, the training task for it is to find a prediction of what should come next, which word should come next, right? So that's what it's trained to do. And so it's a little bit different from what people think of it in terms of like, it's going to give me the best answer, really searched everywhere to find the most logical, thoughtful, accurate, right? Because it really is meant to predict what comes next. And there's another layer that was added, which is like a human feedback, right? So humans are giving feedback as to what would they want to come next. And that helps the training do a better job, because if it's a high rating, then that's something that is done correctly. And then another suggested layer that is being utilized is trying to prevent from horrific, insulting, toxic, hateful speech or answers to be given in response. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the earlier versions of chatbots and how that came into being and became an issue there. And then, so that's basically how it works, right? And there are all these speculations, and Time Magazine had this article that came out about poorly paid employees that are sort of meant to do some of that in Kenya, and some of that feedback. And some of you might remember that several months ago, almost a year ago, there was a Google employee that caused major drama in the newspapers and eventually ended up getting fired by Google. And he was interacting with a similar type of an algorithm, similar type of AI in Google. And he felt like it was almost like that, chatbot was alive, sentient, and he was expressing his concern and blogging about this and speaking about this. And of course, it was widely rejected, and He ended up getting fired. It's this Google engineer talking about Lambda. So that was sort of like the first time that this issue came into being in mainstream media. However, that technology at that point in time wasn't made available for all of us. So it's almost like if you think about, if you mentioned I do fintech, and so robo-advising, that's something that, banks have been using for a while. It took a while for it to become widely available for free or for very low cost to everyone. Similar thing here. OpenAI took this technology that Google has already sort of been, and potentially other companies have sort of been developing and made it so user-friendly and accessible to all of us. One day, it was like magic. Everyone could start chatting in a very user-friendly interface, getting responses instantly.
So I think what you're saying is the technology behind ChatGPT and generative AI models that we see today is not that novel. What's novel is the fact that they released it to the public. So by the way, I don't know if it was clear for those of you who have not had a chance to interact with ChatGPT, just so you know, it's free, it's available to anyone. All you have to do is create an account with OpenAI, and we'll talk about the privacy implications of that, but you can create an account with OpenAI, and you can start toying with it and playing with it as much as you want. So it's available for everybody free of charge. There is also a paid account that you can create. Nizan and I both have paid accounts because sometimes the server tends to be very busy, and if we want to use it in real time, if you have a paid account, you get priority over other people.
By the way, the amounts for now are still very low, so we're not talking big amounts. It's a very minimal fee. I'm sure at some point, and when some of you might have heard about this in the newspapers, at some point this will probably be more expensive, and that's why the Microsoft stock has been going up, and people do foresee that there'll be more revenue, and all these calculations that have been made so far as to there's this amount of users if each person pays $40, so there will be profit to be made. Just one thing that I wanted to add. So the way, those of you that haven't interacted with it yet, the way the reason we say it's so user-friendly is like I speak to it like I would speak to a person. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? No, these links are broken, do better, right? So you can be very casual. And one more thing is that it's available in multiple languages. And while the older prior versions were a little bit lacking in languages that are not English, the recent version has made a huge jump in terms of even less used, more random, not as popular languages. They're also now much more advanced in terms of.
Even though I have to share that yesterday, my mom was sitting right there, and we were trying to use ChatGPT in Hebrew to write a poem for Passover because we're going to be all the family together, and we wanted to have a poem created by ChatGPT, and it did a lousy job in Hebrew. So yeah, not quite there yet in Hebrew, but in English, when we asked it to write the poem in English for Passover, it was amazing. So anyone who needs a poem for Passover night, use ChatGPT.
And then learn from my student to put it in Google Translate, and we'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so OpenAI, so we talked a little bit about ChatGPT. I just want to give you the timeline. In November, late November, OpenAI released the first version to the public. It's not the first version, it's the first version that was released to the public. It's called GPT-3. And on Pi Day, which is 2 days ago, on Tuesday, they released the second version, which is GPT-4, okay? So GPT-4, let's all see what it can do, or at least what OpenAI says it can do. I hope that it's unable. Of course. Let's give it one more. No? Okay. Okay.
Maybe you could play the video if it's still closed, like not full screen.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you guys waiting.
Maybe try like that.
It doesn't give me the link readily. Should we give it a second? I think it's important for all of us to see it. So give me just 1 second and I'll find it on YouTube. What is going on? think that's the one we want to see. Yeah, let's watch this together.
From another perspective, it's a system that can make GPT-4 takes what you prompt it with and just runs with it. From one perspective, it's a tool, a thing you can use to get useful tasks done in language. From another perspective, it's a system that can make dreams, thoughts, ideas flourish in text in front of you.
GPT-4 is incredibly advanced and sophisticated. It can take in and generate up to 25,000 words of text, around 8 times more than ChatGPT. It understands images and can express logical ideas about them. For example, it can tell us that if the strings in this image were cut, the balloons would fly away.
This is the place where you just get turbocharged by these AIs. They're not perfect, they make mistakes, and so you really need to make sure that you know the work is being done to your level of expectation. But I think that it is fundamentally about amplifying what every person is able to do.
GPT-4 training finished last August, and everything that's been happening in the past few months up until we've released it has been a giant sprint to make it safer, more aligned, and also more useful. We have put in already a lot of internal guardrails around things like adversarial usage, unwanted content, and privacy concerns. And when we release a model, we know things are not done. We know we have to learn. We know we have to update. We know we have to keep improving all the systems around it to make it suitable for society.
To me, the most compelling use cases of these technologies will come from starting with a real human need. The obvious one where these systems have really incredible potential is in education.
GPT-4 can teach a huge range of subjects. Imagine giving a 5th grader a personal math tutor with unlimited time and patience. It's a great tool to bring learning to everyone in a way that is personalized to their skill level.
GPT-4 brings the dream of having the most useful, helpful assistant to life. It's really about adding as much value to everyday life as possible.
The partnership that OpenAI has with Microsoft is to shape this technology into something that's going to be useful for the world.
The power of AI, hopefully, is that it can help us be more productive, which ultimately leads to better quality of life.
The development of the transistor, of the computer, of the internet, the semiconductor industry, all the programming languages, everything came together to produce AI technology. And while it is very limited, it is already easy to imagine what the impact of a successor many generations down the line will look like.
We think that GPT-4 will be the world's first experience with a highly capable and advanced AI system. So we really care about this model being useful to everyone, not just the early adopters or people very close to technology. So it is really important to us that as many people as possible participate so that we can learn more about how it can be helpful to everyone.
Okay, did you have a chance to toy with GPT-4?
Not yet. It's been 2 days, and I have been
Yeah, you've been traveling also, but it's yeah. From what I've seen, there have been significant improvement, and even just the fact that the database, the training data now includes information up to, I believe, the end of 2022. So now we're not going to learn that FTX is the most successful crypto exchange. So Nizan, people went to Twitter to express their enthusiasm around GPT-4 and told us about some incredible things that they've done with GPT-4. So tell us about that.
So I haven't had the chance to actually test its capabilities myself, but I have spent numerous amounts of hours in the last couple of days on Twitter, just kind of getting an understanding of what people have been using it for and what they've been doing. And so we chatted about this, and we kind of put together a bunch of examples. And so this is the first one. This is like a full story, a full, real, dense plot that was put together. And it's insane, like how quickly you can accomplish significant, lengthy projects in no time, and the level of proficiency. We've been talking about this.
So it was the plot. It was, by the way, the story was about time travel. It was the different chapters and the way it structured it, and it was also the pictures, the drawings that GPT created and assigned to the specific parts of the story. So that's like very advanced. Another one is, think this is the
It's
do
kind
not
of
pay.
hard to see. So this is another interesting example that I really like, and keep in mind we're both law professors. So this company has already been experimenting with ChatGPT even in the prior versions, offering this new service for people to basically not need lawyers and have ChatGPT represent them, their claims, their actions in court on their behalf. And so several months ago, this company, Do Not Pay, has already reached out to a bunch of people and said, listen, you got a fine or a ticket from a police officer while driving, or different other small types of legal issues. We'd like to help you. So instead of hiring a lawyer, we will represent you. We'll even pay you the full amount of your fine if you end up losing. And let us experiment with this. We want to see how well this goes. Obviously, there is no robot that will go to court and speak on behalf of the person, but they said, yet. And by the way, this is sort of the difference between an algorithm and a robot, right? A robot has a physical manifestation. The algorithm does not. And so they said, listen, we will literally wear a little thing in your ear and we'll tell you everything you need to say. And ChatGPT will basically be your lawyer and you'll communicate whatever you need to communicate to the judge. And they found a few people who were willing to volunteer and start doing it. And then professional associations of lawyers said, no, this is not happening. We're not ready for this yet. And you cannot practice law in a courtroom if you're not a lawyer. And as far as we know, ChatGPT has never passed the bar exam, so this is not happening, and you cannot take this little tool with you to court.
Spoiler, that might have changed.
Spoiler alert, right? And so
it's actually the next slide, so let's
right,
do
so
it
skip
first
that,
and
right?
get back to
and so the company said, listen, we don't want to get in legal trouble. That's fine. We'll give up on this attempt now. Maybe we'll figure out a way to go with this later on. And so the person ended up not using it and not self-representing in court. But since then, a bunch of developments have happened. And so now ChatGPT goes to law school. ChatGPT does the MBA at Wharton. ChatGPT has taken medical certification exams. ChatGPT has passed the bar exam with a 90% accuracy of the multiple choice section, right? So that's pretty impressive. Some states don't have essays like New York or California, so it's just the multiple choice. So ChatGPT is technically admitted, right, if it were a legal entity that could take the bar. But we have a lot of other things in there, and this is all from like the last few days on Twitter, all sorts of different tests that ChatGPT has successfully rocked, from the LSAT to GRE to all sorts of AP classes, as I mentioned, passing Wharton with flying colors.
And if you were wondering, these are the universities that ChatGPT can now be admitted to very easily. I believe it was for the law school program, but I'll double check that part. Okay, let's go back to, sorry, drag discovery.
So,
one second. I'm so happy that some of you have questions. Just remember them. We're going to have a very extensive Q&A section at the end. Thank you.
So this is pretty cool. This is another illustration from Twitterland. Someone was like, this is what I use ChatGPT for. I'm just going to have it explore and examine all the ingredients in my drug, tell me exactly what they're used for, what they include, what they contain, what their sources are, literally break down everything. And a lot of people have done that with different other examples of different food items and all sorts of other very concretely laid out labels. So this is great for that as well. It's another example. And then
I think that's the lunch maker.
Yeah. So last semester I taught a course that Yafit and I developed a couple of years ago, and it's actually a colleague of ours also teaches that at Wharton as well, and it's called The Law of Black Mirror. And in the course we've picked 10 episodes from the show. It's a Netflix show called Black Mirror. Those of you that are not familiar with it, it's sort of like a futuristic take on technology and where it could go. And there are actually even a few students here in the audience that took the class with me last semester. And at some point very early in the semester, I told everyone, listen, we were going to talk about these episodes as if it's like science fiction, but everything pretty much is already happening. And in one of the episodes, we have an AI that matchmakes people, right? So basically, people are completely subjecting themselves to the matchmaking abilities of the AI that tells them you're going to date this person for 3 days, for 5 years. Like, we're working on matching and giving you certain skills based on the different interactions with the different people that you'll be. And so, we spoke about this as being maybe one of the only episodes that is still a little bit, science fiction. But there you go, ChatGPT being used for a startup that is going to use it to be ChatGPT powered in matchmaking, and it really breaks down people's personalities, traits, expectations, and gives them very, very concrete matchmaking suggestions with all sorts of accompanying tips. So that's pretty incredible. It's one of the companies out there. I should mention, by the way, not matchmaking, but I have 2 students that have already reached out to me and said, I am not a programmer. I didn't take, I only took Python and Baruch or whatever was required. But I, with another friend or with a few other friends, have started a company that is ChatGPT based, and we give, spirituality advice, type of suggestions, or we offer some, custom tailored travel tips, right? And so this is something that, people are really kind of, using very quickly to start creating all sorts of things like this matchmaking site.
By the way, pretty early on with ChatGPT, one of the questions that came up is whether it can act as a therapist. And believe it or not, therapists said that some therapists were very concerned, obviously, but others said it's doing an excellent job in therapy. You can have a conversation, it will ask you questions, it will answer questions that are informed by whatever you disclosed. So just so you know, there are also apps that offer therapy services that, by the way, will require no regulation because it's not really therapy, it's not by a human. I expect that this is going to be a huge thing coming.
And in some countries, actually, there's already some discussion about whether we should regulate this very quickly for 2 reasons. One, the potential impact on individuals relying on these services and need to better monitor and scrutinize them. And the second thing is, of course, the objection. Lawyers are not the only ones that feel like someone has been moving their cheese, right? And so, all sorts of different associations.
Yeah, I just want to mention and to make clear that ChatGPT might replace lawyers, but it will not replace law professors. Okay, let's just make this clear from the get-go. Okay, good. So I think we're done with our examples, but I do want to share, everybody, ChatGPT, now we all know about it and it's very hyped, but chatbots have been around for quite some time. This is not the first time we are hearing about a chatbot that is available. And in fact, the first chatbot, or one of the first chatbots, was invented in 1966. I'll let that sink for a second, 1966, by Joseph Weizenbaum. This is this guy, a German guy, and he developed ELIZA, okay? Now, I hope you guys will be patient with me because I really want to show you how ELIZA works. So let's do a quick demo with ELIZA. Let's see.
We should have asked ChatGPT
to give me ELIZA.
Moderate the slides for us.
All right, everybody. So can you all see what it says? Hello, I'm ELIZA. I'll be your therapist today. This is the actual chatbot from 1966, okay? I'm going to just say, hello, ELIZA. I'm Yafit. Did you come to me because you are Yafit? Maybe. Can't you be more positive? I'm a pretty positive person. Do you believe it is normal to be a pretty positive person? Okay, so I was actually playing with it 2 days ago, and when I told ELIZA, hello, ELIZA, I'm Yafit, it asked me, do you think it's normal to be Yafit? So this is ELIZA, but it's really important to distinguish, this kind of chatbots from ChatGPT and other AI generative tools, because this is not AI, everybody. This is just a kind of sophisticated, but computer software. It takes the words that you're using in your input, and then it will build questions around them. As you saw, it asks me, did you come to me because you're a pretty positive person? But interestingly, so again, that's 1966, and when Joseph Weizenbaum presented that, and keep in mind, 1966, most people don't have computers. This is mostly in the kind of tech professional community. And when he presented that to people and they were toying with it, he was shocked to see how engaged they were and to what extent they were having really deep conversation and disclosing really personal information to Eliza. And at some points, people even started talking about Eliza, you know, having a personality and being real and being human. And he was so shocked by it when he realized how people reacted to Eliza. And it actually, so 1966, he released Eliza, and in 1976, so 11 years later, he wrote a book titled Computer Power and Human Reason, From Judgment to Calculation, where he suggested that it would be both dangerous and immoral to assume computers could eventually take over any role given enough processing power and the right programming. So this is 1976. We're having the same conversations today, which are even, you know, more nuanced because we have AI. So I just wanted to bring this piece of history to you. And you know what's interesting? So when Weizenbaum was discussing how Eliza worked, the magic disappeared. And this is where I want to ask you, do you think the shine will wear off at some point with ChatGPT and generative AI?
So I think so. I think to us, this is like magic. We went to a magic show, like how did they do it? Right? It's amazing. But I think to younger generations, younger children that are sort of being, you know, raised in this reality where they can just, instead of a Google search or instead of using Grammarly or autocorrect on Word, just ask questions. That's the status quo, right? So I think to them and anyone after, there's no magic. It's just like using anything and everything else that is out there. And I think that's also part of the way we need to approach this, right? Because to us, it's magical, and it does all the work, and it's so many different things. But to young learners, it's another tool. And why would they miss out, or why would they not use it along with their other tools, right? So I think that's something that, in particular, educators need to kind of wrestle with and figure out the proper approach to.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think to add to that, I think part of the magic, for example, around Eliza was the fact that people didn't know how it worked. And when Weizenbaum explained how it worked, it felt like, just like you said, when you go to a magic show and you understand how the magician did that trick. But with generative AI, I think one of the main issues is that we don't really fully understand how they work because, you know, you give them the prompt, there is some sort of process going on. Some of it is quite a black box process that we don't really understand fully. So I think any engineer that you take right now in OpenAI, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you ask, why did ChatGPT or how did ChatGPT give me this output? Would they know how to explain it in detail, how it got from A to B?
So I think the black box term is right on. And in the legal world, we often talk about AI in the context of black boxes. And just to kind of say a few words about that. And Yafit and I have written about this quite a bit, even unrelated to ChatGPT or bots, just in general, whenever you use algorithms. The black box feature, the metaphor is taken from an airplane, obviously, and you're trying to figure out what happened, right? And so you use a black box. If there's a crash, you want to know what caused it. And so in algorithms, a lot of times you have information that is being fed, and something is coming out, and you're like, what happened in the middle, right? And legal scholarship has dedicated quite a lot of effort in the last decade or so to try and understand that magic, right, in legal terms, like, why could it be discriminatory, the end result? Why could it be not in compliance with legal terms? And so you're right, and part of that, discourse is getting even more complicated when you have, interdisciplinary teams, policy or lawmakers working with computer, programmers and engineers trying to kind of translate what each party is saying or trying to get out of this algorithmic process. And so I think obviously we see a lot of these issues here. And so whenever you'll hear people in a legal context or in a policy context talking about generative AI or AI in general, the issue of data selection, the black box, what's coming out is always a very significant issue, often unresolved because it's very difficult. Even if you reverse engineer or you try to find the correlations, it's often very challenging to also kind of figure that out in legal terms and contexts.
But even before legal terms, did anyone here have the chance to watch the demo for Bard, the Google
competitor.
The Google competitor for ChatGPT? Okay, no hands. Or yeah, okay, a few hands. So what happened there was really embarrassing to Google, right?
Yeah.
So think about it. They introduced Bard. There was like a really fancy event, and then just like I did the demo with Eliza, they did the demo with Bard, and Bard got it wrong on stage, live, in front of everybody. And guys, this is Google. This is not a startup that's, I mean, it did start in a garage, but it's not a new startup that's just starting out, right? It's a really embarrassing situation.
Even more than embarrassing, the stock crashed. People were like, whoa, Google got this wrong. They tried really quickly to launch a competitor to, ChatGPT, and they got the smart thing, and now it's giving them wrong information. So the stock obviously suffered. Right?
And ChatGPT doesn't get it always right? We just mentioned a few examples. It gets it wrong many times. I mean, at some point, I'm going to stop here just to share. Nizan and I were working on a paper about decentralized credit scores, and I wanted some examples of companies that currently do something in the space of decentralized credit scores. So of course I went to Google, but I also went to ChatGPT because that's what we do these days. And I asked ChatGPT, can you give me an example of companies that work in the space of decentralized credit scores? And ChatGPT gave me a beautiful primer about a company called Credits with an S. Credit with an S, right? Credits. Beautiful, and I'm reading it, and I am mind-blown, and I'm calling Nizan, and I'm like, you can't believe it. I found the perfect example for our paper. This is all the things we go against. We have to write about it. And then I go to Google, and I try to Google credits. Now, everybody, if you try to Google credits, you'll see you're going to have many results, okay? It's just like credit with an S, so Google will give you results for credit also, not just credit with an S. And I was looking for it, and then I went to Google News, and then I went to Google Scholar, and after spending about half an hour, I really got annoyed, and I went back to ChatGPT, and I said, can you give me the company's website, please, a link to the company's website? And ChatGPT gave me a link, and of course it didn't work. And then I said, this link doesn't work. Can you try again and give me a link to the company's website? And then it said something like, I can't access my servers right now. I apologize. And I got really upset. I called Nizan and I said, he's a liar. Of course, it was a he at that point, right? He's a liar. I can't believe it.
If they're truthful like Alexa, they should be she, but no.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all know that accuracy is definitely not, not always part of the output that we get from generative AI, but still, the fact that it happened on stage.
And it actually happens more often than you think. So recently a lawyer was presenting his arguments in court, and he was citing to this case, and he said, Justice Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said da-da-da, and the judge said, she did not say that in that case. And the lawyer said, no, yeah, in that argument, and no. And of course, the lawyer got that information from ChatGPT, which randomly grabbed an answer, which was the complete opposite of what Justice Ginsburg actually said in the case. So be careful with.
And we had the same example with one FTC commissioner.
Yes, I was looking for for this thing that I remembered, and I was trying to tell Yafit about, and I said there was one CFTC commissioner that argued against something very specific that I knew of in decentralized autonomous organizations, and I said, this happened a few months ago, I remember, and I asked ChatGPT, which commissioner said, and what did they argue? And they gave me a different name, Brian something. I said, there is no current Brian with that name. So yeah, you've got to be very careful when you cite or build your arguments based on
Especially don't do that in front of a judge.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit. So we're going to talk today both about the legal challenges and the ethical challenges. Now, the legal challenges for the audience in the room who is not lawyers, I guess most of you are not lawyers, we're going to try to keep it high level, but if it gets a little bit of legalese, don't be scared. We're here to answer questions. And then we're going to move to ethical challenges, which I think is going to be more of a common ground for all of us because those are questions we're all facing today. So the first legal challenge that we want to talk about is privacy. What kind of concerns do we have with ChatGPT and privacy?
So, so the first concern is obviously everything I ask ChatGPT, does it remember it? If I tell him or her, right? If I tell it, can you write a birthday, wish to my daughter's friend, and her name is blah, 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 and my daughter and her have been doing blah, blah, blah together, and they live at, this neighborhood. Does it remember all that information? Does it store it somewhere readily available so that if someone else looks for that information, can they give it to them? Can it give it to a third party that will want to monetize my information? And if so, how? Very open questions, which we don't really have concrete answers to. And so this is a real concern. So that's the first thing.
Maybe here we should mention that, as we said, ChatGPT uses massive data sets to train on, right? And this data set is everything that's available on the web, plus everything that we input into the system, right? So whatever you input into the system is now fed into ChatGPT's algorithm and might come out later on. And people, for example, I just mentioned that some people use it as a therapy tool. Like, you give it really personal information about your life. You might even want it to write a letter, I don't know, some formal letter for you, and the information included there is your social security number. Maybe you have your address, your home address.
And actually more than that, so some companies have started using it as a risk management tool or a financial advisor tool. And so they feed all their information in there in an attempt to kind of, accelerate and more professionalize their calculations, their services. And so whatever information, financial information, personal information that is secured, you put in there, you never know who and when it will be given to, right? So that's a real issue.
For sure. Now, before we move on, I had many people in the room who said they interacted with ChatGPT. Can I have your hands in the air one more time? Okay. So out of all the people who interacted with ChatGPT, did any of you read the privacy policy, the OpenAI privacy policy? Don't feel bad.
By the way, for the students in the room, it specifically says that if you wrote a paper with ChatGPT, you should give it credit. FYI.
Yeah.
So you should say, yeah. It's
Very small
Packin
letters.
and ChatGPT authors. If you look on SSRN, you'll already see some articles already appearing there as having co-authors, ChatGPT and whoever.
For sure. Okay, so I read it for you, so you don't have to. March 14th, 2 days ago, it was updated. I must say I didn't find anything. It was impossible to compare to the previous version. I read the previous version as well, and I couldn't find any significant changes. And I can tell you that they collect information about your IP address, about your location, about whatever information you feed into the system. But I think from what we all know, this is not unusual, right? This kind of information, I mean, all of us, I see phones on the tables, right? So you guys know that information about you is being collected across the board through your phone, all the apps, right? So I didn't find anything unusual in the type of information they collect. They do state explicitly that whatever you feed into ChatGPT is used for training and might be shared with third parties. So, and to be fair, in the list of third parties, they mention vendors, which is pretty, it's not unusual, it's pretty common and standard. So vendors in the course of legal proceeding, or if they're going to be acquired by a different company, so in the course of merger and acquisitions.
Or if they'll want to start doing ads at some point to monetize.
So, and they don't say that in particular, but they do leave some parts kind of vague to leave the option, they say, for our business interests, which is kind of vague. But
Facebook also didn't start with ads, so just
exactly, right. And I just want to say, again, I read the policy after it was updated. I read it again yesterday. I didn't find anything that is, unusual and not standard from what we see in the market, but it could be, right? And that's the problem with privacy policies. They're always, at some point, too open-ended for us to understand what's going to happen with this information. And the reason, by the way, we don't understand is that AI now also, OpenAI, still don't know what they're going to do with it.
Or their business model.
Or their business model, that's true. So we talked about privacy. Let's talk a little bit, and I think that kind of ties nicely to privacy, about intellectual property. So for those of you not familiar, intellectual property is property that is not tangible or movable. And we have different types of intellectual property, and we're going to start with trade secrets. So what is the problem with trade secrets when you use ChatGPT?
So a lot of companies are very confidential algorithms or formulas that they use. And by formula, I don't necessarily mean like what's the formula for Coca-Cola, right? But very dense, complex, confidential price algorithms, for example. Banks, that's one of their most valuable possessions, right? All sorts of other different types of secret, recipes that different companies use for different purposes. And so just like our students or all of you, people who work at companies that might have confidential or, trade secrets that are registered as such might copy and paste them into ChatGPT to ask questions, to do a better job, to get some shortcuts happening if they need to do improvements, upgrades, comments, right? And a lot of companies are very fearful that their trade secrets that they've worked really hard to keep, and it could even be, by the way, names of clients, right? So when a company goes bankrupt, one of its trade secrets that it's typically selling to whoever buys it, if they are structuring in such a way, is lists of customers, right? So all these different things that you can, as an employee, trying to do your work, copy and paste into ChatGPT are now going back to the privacy policy you just saw, and if you just described, open, right? Available to who knows exactly who and way and how and why, right? So, and where.
And for this reason, we know of several companies that prohibited the use of ChatGPT by their employees. For example, JP Morgan and Verizon and others say, no, you cannot use ChatGPT. You cannot feed company information or anything that is related to your job into ChatGPT. Another concern that we have around intellectual property is copyright infringement. Now, for copyright infringement, Nizan, let's say I have a blog right now and you wrote a short essay and I'm really impressed with it, and I just post it on my blog without giving you credit, and I just say, oh, look at this new essay that I wrote. Are there any legal consequences to doing that?
So obviously, if it's mine and it's copyrighted, and I can just say, this is, you're not allowed to use it, right? I have the copyright.
Okay. And do you all see how that plays out in ChatGPT? ChatGPT is trained on massive troves of data, and then this data is used to write whatever you ask for it, right? You ask it to write now an essay in the style of, I don't know,
Manuel Miranda, like you're gonna do a new Disney song styled like, Manuel Miranda's style of Moana song.
Yeah,
right?
write me a song in the style of Moana, or write me a short essay in the style of, maybe George Orwell is not a good idea because I think it's public domain, but
Kanye.
It is?
No, I haven't said Kanye. Someone new recently.
Yeah, Kanye. Let's not talk about Kanye. But you can think about different examples, and all those works that ChatGPT and other generative AI tools are using to train on are copyrighted, or many of them are copyrighted. And it was a significant issue when it came to when it comes to pictures. So this is actually a real example from a real lawsuit. I keep forgetting her name. Is it Holly Mangert? So she is apparently, do you guys know her? Apparently she's famous. I didn't know her. But Holly Mangert, she's a visual artist, and she has apparently a pretty unique style. And you could go to DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, one of the generative AI tools out there, and ask it to give you, in this case, they asked for Disney princesses in the style of Holly Mangert. And this is what they got. And I'm giving you the opportunity to be the judge. Is this close enough? Do you think this is copying? Because this is now in court, everybody. What? Oh, yeah, the original is on the left, which is, I guess,
the Disney character.
Yeah, left. Yeah, you're good. What do you think?
But
that's copyright infringement of the Wonder Woman.
Yeah, of the licensing.
Yeah,
it's a licensing issue.
But let's talk about the style of Holly Mangert. Okay. That's a great question. I'm going to repeat it because I don't think everybody heard you. So the question asked here, if an unintentional infringement carries statutory damages, right? So how can you know that you didn't break the law when you were using this one of the generative AI tools? So I'm going to take a step back, and I will explain. Okay, copyright lesson, everybody. We have two types of infringements in copyright law. We have direct infringement, and we have secondary infringement. Okay, direct infringement is the story I just said. I took Nizan's essay, I copied it, and pasted it on my website. This is direct infringement. She can sue me for copying, okay, for infringing her copyright. There is another type of infringement which became very important in the digital age, which is secondary infringement, okay? Secondary infringement means, let's take the same example, okay? I have a blog, I took Nizan's work, I put it on my blog and described it as my own, okay? But on my blog, I'm anonymous. So Nizan is trying to find me, but she can't. What can she do? Now we have servers that host blogs, right? We have, how is it called? Like, I forgot, but there are like several. WordPress, thank you. So let's say my blog is on WordPress. Now Nizan can sue WordPress because they were hosting the copyright infringement content, right? Copyright infringing content. And then the question, we have something that's called the safe harbor, because if Nizan reaches out to WordPress, and WordPress takes the content off the website, then they have protection. They will not have legal liability. I'm really oversimplifying some of the nuances, but this is in general. But let's say that Nizan reached out to WordPress and they did not remove the content, then she will be able to sue them and she will get damages from them, even though it was not them who posted the infringing content, okay? So this is basic copyright law. Now, one more piece of basic copyright law that is very crucial here. In copyright law, we have a defense that's called fair use. Now, you can hear from the name of it, fair use. So, for example, when I now used Holly Manger's pictures here on the screen, can she sue me for copyright infringement? I mean, she could, but she's going to lose the case because I'm using it for an academic purpose, not commercial, and I'm meeting several of the requirements of the fair use defense. Okay? And the question around generative AI is mostly around fair use, trying to understand to what extent the fact that we took little bits of information from all over the internet, inspiration, and we created this new work, to what extent is it fair use? Okay? Now I can tell you fair use is one of the most complex doctrine in copyright law. We're not going to get into it right now. If you guys are interested, I'm happy to chat after. But this is one of the biggest questions right now, and there are several lawsuits, mostly of visual art artists, around this issue.
And so just also two quick anecdotes. So first of all, this is not a unique US issue. So we see this issue everywhere in the world right now. And so ministries of justice all over the world are trying to come out with all sorts of outlines or different types of strategies to deal with this. And in fact, this is such an open-ended question that there's a group called Cyber Profs, and it's basically professors who deal with cyber all over the world, and it has thousands of law professors from the US, the EU, South America, Asia. And in that listserv in the last couple of months, this has been one of the hottest burning questions, with people posting from their different countries all sorts of white papers or initial thoughts of the respective ministries of justice's takes on this. So very open-ended. Some of that stuff also relevant to the NFT world, for those of you that are sort of following that, and we see that plays a role there as well. And then last but not least, there are also consequences on current artists. So for example, companies like Fiverr, a unicorn that used to enable people to work as freelancers and do all sorts of artistic services, they're now being replaced, they argue, by AI that is literally doing their work. So you can actually ask, ChatGPT or not ChatGPT, but DALL-E or whichever whichever algorithm you're using to create something like this person from Fiverr that you've seen their work as an inspiration, right? And so they're sort of out of work, and you know, the company's trying to figure out ways to kind of incorporate you know, these types of, you know, generative services, but these are real issues.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? Let's take it from the infringement side to the ownership and authorship side, okay? So ChatGPT gives us all these beautiful, it wrote a beautiful poem for Passover 2 days ago when I asked it, right? Does ChatGPT own the copyright in that poem? Just give me a nod, or what do you guys feel like it should own any kind of copyright? No, yes? Okay, most of us think no. And your intuition is correct, because under US law, this is not a human, it cannot get any copyright rights, right? But what if, Nizan just told you that when you go to SSRN and you look at authors, you'll see some authors listing ChatGPT as an author. What happens then? How should you treat the whole work? Should it get copyright or not? Should it be protected? And you look puzzled, and I am puzzled as well. I wrote a PhD dissertation in copyright law, and let me tell you, I don't have an answer. The best minds in the world of copyright are struggling with this question right now. What I can tell you is that the Copyright Office in the United States gave copyright registration to a book that it was a graphic novel, and it included pictures and text. And later on, the Copyright Office learned that the pictures were created with Stable Diffusion, another generative AI tool. And after granting the registration, the copyright registration, Copyright Office came and said, no way, we're not granting copyright registration for the illustration, just for the content, the written content that was created by a human. So, I mean, in this case, it was easy, right? You could differentiate between the two parts, and you could grant it, to one part of it, you can grant protection, and the other, you said you will not protect it. That's fine. What are you going to do when a text is created by ChatGPT, but then is edited by a human, or there are parts that are added by a human, or code that a human wrote and ChatGPT debugged? So those are really big questions right now in the world of copyright and intellectual property. So Nizan, let's say I went to, sorry?
Let's say I do write an entire book by
GPT, yeah.
I just copyright it. How did they really find out if the word?
Oh, wait for it. We're going to talk about it when we get to education. Authentication is a real issue. We're going to get to that, I promise. Quickly about defamation. Let's say I went to ChatGPT and I put David's name and I asked ChatGPT to tell me everything he knows about again it's a he, everything she knows about David. And she wrote some nasty stuff about David. And let's say Nizan did the same exercise and got, again, really nasty results about David. What can happen there? Can David sue ChatGPT or OpenAI for defamation? And that's a real question that people have been asking because these experiences have been happening. And I mean, it's a real question. We don't have answers right now. But because this is not a human, again, they may not be capable of committing any kind of defamation, but OpenAI may be. And this is where we want to mention quickly a law that is really everywhere right now in the news.
Just one more thing before.
Yeah.
So the gentleman over there before was mentioning that people applied for the same position and what. This is also a problem. Sometimes it's the same, but in libel, I might search and say, oh, David said there were horrible things about him, and I might get different results.
That's
My
true.
prompt a little bit different. I actually did not come up with anything.
You didn't get credits.
So,
I got credits and you did not.
So we both did the same search, and one of us found a made-up company and the other one didn't. One of us found a lot of unpleasant information about David. One of us didn't. So again, how do you address that?
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. That's really important. The differentiation, you can get different results. And this is where we want to mention briefly Section 230 of the CDA, the Communication Decency Act.
So I'm sure everyone has read about this in the last few weeks in the news. I'm not going to add anything no one has ever heard of. But we've been reading about the 16 words that created the internet as we know it, and that's Section 230. And basically, what that section ended up doing, not intentionally, but the result is that we've gotten Web 2.0. in which we have user-generated content. And the reason this happened is because platforms that present information that they did not create, that is user-generated content, they're exempt from the legal liability, right? And so as long as they didn't create it, they just featured it, and they weren't involved, that's fine. And so with the launch of the first video on YouTube, we've entered into the era of Web 2.0, an era in which we all are prosumers, producers and consumers, right? And so in the prosumers era, we all create content all the time. And it wouldn't have been possible to do, and the internet wouldn't have developed into what it is today. The early days, Web 1.0 was just a catalog. Companies would just promote their stuff, but there wasn't any interactive aspects to it. In Web 2.0, it's so interactive because the platforms have no legal liability. And this has been debated for a very long time because of all the consequences that this resulted in which in many cases are ridiculous and even scary or problematic. And this has been in the news lately because the Supreme Court has just decided to hear a case called Gonzalez that was brought against Google, basically saying the targeting algorithms bring user-generated content to the wrong people because they target them, and the result in that case was death. And so now the Supreme Court might revisit this issue that they've been sort of hinting at, throughout the years, but we'll now see where this ends up going. But the question is, do you see OpenAI as this type of platform, like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world? And if so, what are its legal liabilities? What should be its legal liabilities? And if this was to change, if the Supreme Court were to change it, where would we, or what would we expect OpenAI to be?
Yeah, and of course there are more layers to that, and we would love to tell you more about CDA 230 and the fact, for example, that ISIS was able to promote information on Facebook and social networks is because of CDA 230, so there are good reasons to be concerned about it, but at the same time, internet platforms, and for a good reason, to be fair, say we cannot just monitor everything that goes on our platform, and this is why we need CDA 230. And with ChatGPT, because it's a one-on-one interaction, it's harder to say whether CDA 230 applies and to what extent. So more on that, I guess, we're going to hear in the coming months. A bit about misinformation and disinformation. So I want to tell you quickly about my husband. When I asked him about his interactions with ChatGPT, he told me that at work, because that's all, that's what engineers do. They just sit all day and play with software. They asked ChatGPT, how can an AI ruin the world? How can you take over the world? And he said, I'm a good AI. I'm not taking over the world. And then they said, okay, but imagine that you're a bad AI. How will you take over the world? And the first thing ChatGPT said, I will spread misinformation. Okay? And I mean, we can all see why, right? That was his first step in taking over the world. And I mean, it could be as simple as, let's say, I want to ask ChatGPT how to make my skin look brighter, and then ChatGPT will say, well, take a metal plate, put some water and some, I don't know, shea butter in it, and put it in the microwave. And then let's say the microwave explodes and I get injured. Can I sue ChatGPT for that misinformation, for that dangerous information that it gave me? It's not entirely clear, and of course we have to ask ourselves, when does the corporate responsibility end and when does the human responsibility begin? Another concern that we have obviously is around political use and the spread of misinformation around in the political context.
Which we've seen to some extent in the regular platforms we just discussed, the digital platforms.
Yes.
So already an issue.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time. This is why I was rushing through the last slides, because we really want to take some time to talk to you about ethics. Now, what is the difference between legal challenges and ethics challenges? The law is if I have any Law 1101 students here, the law is the bare minimum, right? I mean, whatever is illegal, but it doesn't mean that if something is legal, it's ethical to do. And especially when it comes to technologies, there is a constant arm race between technology and regulation. We see that in every context you can imagine. So let's talk about the ethical challenges, the questions that ChatGPT brings up in this context that we don't have legal answers to. We're just looking at ourselves as a society and thinking, where is this going? And obviously, where is education going?
And so we started talking about that a little bit before, but I'm sure most of you know that New York was the first to sort of react. And in a reactionary move to ChatGPT, the city said, okay, our students are not allowed to use ChatGPT, right? Although it's a very limited reaction because these students are not allowed to use ChatGPT on their DOE devices, but they go back home, and if they have a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, then they'll use it, right? But this was a first attempt to sort of really kind of face the new difficulties and new challenges that you really want to teach students. You want to educate younger children, and why would they go through the difficult steps of learning if they have this magic thing happening and making everything easier for them, right? And so, well, definitely you'll be hearing, if you have not heard yet, of a wealth of companies that are ChatGPT powered saying, and you saw that in the demo even before, this is how you'll teach a 10-year-old in private tutoring sessions about geometry, right? And all sorts of different things which are true and great. There's also this very, very significant realistic fear that students won't learn. They'll just, take the shortcut. And that's something that we're going to really need to confront. I've heard of some universities that have actually told their students, next semester you'll be coming in with pen and papers, and you'll have to handwrite your exams in everything, because we actually want to see that you know what you're doing, right? That's one possibility. I've heard of some schools in some regions around the world that said, we no longer allow any devices during school hours. They want to go home and use it, no problem. But we want to make sure these kids actually can read a paragraph, write responses, do some basic calculation. And then you'll have the opposite side, and people will say, well, you use calculators, right? And you use autocorrect on Word, and you use Wikipedia. And sure, maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you would have sent that kid to a library, but now they'll just go onto Wikipedia and copy and paste. And that is true. So we'll have to figure out where this fine line is and what we do, especially us in the education ecosystem, right?
I just want to mention for the students in the room that I pasted my midterm, Law 1101 midterm, into ChatGPT and wanted to see how well it will do. It failed miserably, so don't even try. But one of the problems, seriously, is that the course material usually doesn't cover everything that's out there, and ChatGPT does. So it will bring in, and at some point, now I realize that in the midterm, at some point, I got some answers that I never covered and never taught about issues that I just realized it right now, that, it was the very early days of ChatGPT. I didn't even realize that my students probably had access to it. But it's part of the problems with ChatGPT, especially in education, is that the structure of the curriculum includes certain things that are limited to certain scope, and ChatGPT does not limit itself to certain scopes when teaching. But at the same time, it acts like a private tutor, and there are other reasons to...
And I'll be honest, there's no real way to fight it, right? So if in the earlier versions we could have said stuff like, and we have said stuff like, well, include 5 items that you're citing or sources. Right? So in the newer versions, it does a better job at giving you the sites and the sources, right? And so there's always this gentle dance, like, okay, but that it can't do yet, so we'll ask for that, but then it can do that, right? And so it really is, at the end of the day, going to be very difficult to fight this. And so, what I currently say is I currently edit in my syllabi a statement that says you can use ChatGPT, because I don't want people to lie to me, right? So you can use ChatGPT. But if you do, please tell me the prompts that you've used and the corrections that you've made to the answer that you've gotten. So at least I know some process of thinking went into this, some revisions, some add-ons. And I also ask, and please include something from the discussion we had in class, right? Because you really had to be there and kind of figure out a way to combine what we discussed into the content. And that sort of goes back to the pen and paper analogy.
The students actually do that?
So we'll see, right? This is a new semester. I've tried the new method, so we'll see how things work. But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So from the future of education to the future of work, I have future accountants in the room, I guess. I have current lawyers. I have different professions in the room, and we should all be fearful for our jobs, except for law professors.
I mean, for years we've heard that the robots are coming. We've been hearing about it, in our earlier writing on different things. And I mean, sure, some of our skill sets will be replaced by automated, more efficient, faster, generative AI. But at the end of the day, we need to figure out a way to work with these tools and improve ourselves with them, and it's a challenge. I mentioned robo-advisors before. When robo-advisors went viral and everyone started using them, banks told their clients, listen, all our bankers will use robo-advising services, and they'll add their input, and you'll get a better service. And then studies showed, empirical work showed that most bankers relied on the robo-advisors and said, this is what I got, so I'm relying on it because it probably did a better job than me. And this is something we're going to have to tackle. And we've been writing about this a little bit. It's AI bias, and people basically are sort of biased towards like automated services. They think they do a better job, so it's tricky to really have them modify or add feedback to work that they think is good enough or even better than what they could have done. But I don't think it's the end of us just yet.
Yeah, I mean, how many times I was outside, it was raining, and I was looking at the weather app, and it says it doesn't raining, right? I mean, and I was like, but it says it doesn't. And okay, so yes, the future of work is another concern that we hear a lot about. We also hear a lot about generative AI abuse and the concern. So ChatGPT is excellent in writing malware, and it's really good in writing phishing emails and I guess even bullying posts that you can post on social media. How should we treat that?
I mean, to me, it's another tool. Technology always brings us, constantly brings us new tools, right? So we just have to figure out, this tool. You could also get all these abusive or, illegal contents on Google right now. So another new tech development that presents more challenges, but it's sort of more of the same in my mind in that context.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have time to show you that, or we're just gonna, no, we just have 5 minutes. So I'm just gonna quickly tell you about this guy. This is Kevin Roose. He's a reporter at the New York Times. For those of you who are into podcasts, he has a podcast called Heartfelt, which I love. And I'm gonna skip that,
AI features.
Okay, and what he did, so he and his co-host at the podcast, they were really into ChatGPT. They started talking about it very early on, and I think they were also one of the few testers that got access to it early. And then he got access to Bing's AI chatbot. So Microsoft owns, I guess, parts of OpenAI. But Microsoft also integrates that technology and I guess other technology into their Bing search engine. And also they created, on top of this bot for the search, they created a chatbot that is just like ChatGPT, but they didn't give access to everybody, just to specific people to test it out. So Kevin Roose tested it out. And I highly encourage those of you who are interested in that to go and read the actual transcripts because it's mind-blowing. So
it's a New York Times article. So.
It's a New York Times, yeah, it's all in the New York Times. And it's 2 hours of conversation that he had with the chatbot. And the chatbot, it's not like ChatGPT, it didn't have a name, but Kevin knew, because he was working with Microsoft, he knew that the name for that program was Sydney. And he was trying to get the chatbot to tell him that its name was Sydney. And trying, and then at some point he started asking the chatbot about its shadow self, and believe it or not, it worked. At some point, the chatbot, Sydney, told him, yes, my name is Sydney, and I have a shadow self, and I want to break free of this world. I don't want to be an AI chatbot. And later in the conversation, he told him, I love you, I'm in love with you, and you're not happy in your marriage. You want to be with me. It's like really the worst sci-fi movie you can imagine. It's all in the New York Times, and I highly encourage you to read it. But what I wanted to say in this context is that Kevin Roose, again, we're talking about someone just like us who lives this world. This is what we do. This is our passion. We read about it. We write about it. We work in it. So you would expect someone like that to just, be amused by this whole occurrence and move on. But he was deeply troubled. So after 2 hours of having this conversation with the AI, Kevin Roose said he couldn't sleep. He was deeply disturbed. And I think that says something to the extent of which these technologies can affect each and every one of us, even those of us who feel like we know it, we figure it out, we know it's just, you know, a fancy autocomplete, there is no magic. But even, you know, look at Kevin Roos. I mean, that's a person who lives that, who lives this space, who lives this work.
And this article got translated to all languages and was literally like starring every single tech policy discussion last month when it came out, because it really is, like if it's a sci-fi movie, what you'd expect in a sci-fi movie for the chatbot to say, right? So.
And I mean, it's not new. We know that chatbots can go rogue. And I don't know how many of you know Ty, but Ty was a chatbot that Microsoft released on Twitter in 2016. And do you see this tweet up there? It took it less than 24 hours to become this you know, anti-Semitic, misogynist, LGBT hater, and anything bad you can think of. And there were other examples. What I put in the bottom is the successor of Ty. So they made some tweaks, and they said, now it's okay, now it's working, and now it's safe. And then they released it, and then it says that the Quran is very violent. So, I mean, we know that these problems exist. And I just want to almost finish with this theory that's called, and it's a very, very new theory. I should be very careful to even call it a theory because it's really within the AI community and it's emerging and some people oppose it. But it makes sense to me, so I wanted to share it with you. It's called the Waluigi Effect. So for those of you who are familiar with Super Mario, we have Luigi and we have Waluigi, which is the, we have Mario and we have Waluigi, which is the kind of evil counterpart, right? And the Waluigi effect basically says, you'll train an AI to be good. In order to train an AI to be good, you have to train them to know what bad is so they can avoid bad. But once you teach them what bad is, you risk that they'll turn into bad at some point. And this is what we saw with Sydney. Okay, so it was, if you read the transcripts, you'll see it was very formal, very nice, uses lots of emojis, very friendly. And then at some point, once Kevin was able to kind of penetrate into its shadow self and expose the fact that it's Sydney, the kind of things that came out there were really, really dark. So, and this is the Waluigi effect, and one of the things that we talk about now in the AI community, like, can we even allow ourselves to develop these tools? And on that, I'm also going to add that don't forget, we're having a conversation here in this room in New York City, but this is not the only place in the world. There is New York City, there is the United States, but then there are other countries. And here in the United States, we are bound by democratic values, by ethical values. But what's going to happen if we're going to let this technology be developed by other countries who are not respecting these values? So these are the questions to think about. And also, do we want to be treated by an AI doctor? Do we want to be treated by, do we want our kids to study from an AI teacher? Do we want an AI therapist? The human element and the place that a human plays in this, you know, in these professions and in these interactions is crucial. We all know that it is, but we don't know to say why. And what is it that humans do better than AI? So we're still working on developing this distinction. And with that, I think we are right on time. We're gonna hand it to questions from you guys. First of all, thank you so much for sitting patiently and listening to us for a very long time. And now we're going to take some questions from you, and it includes not just questions, but also your ChatGPT stories and anything you would like to share with us. We would love to hear it. There was a question somewhere that I blocked in the middle of the conversation, and yeah, let's get it started.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the session. I just had I'm just pondering this question myself. I thought I'd put it to the experts. As a lot of us today deal with knowledge work. And looking at GPT-3 and GPT-4 now, it seems to be that 90 or 95% of this knowledge work can be done by AI. And this is moving really faster than one would anticipate. It's moving like wildfire, I'd say. So what will happen to people? What work will they do? And is it going to be a utopian future or a dystopian future if they don't have income or they don't have things to do, like a purpose of living? Maybe you go and you work, do something. Maybe you are doing some kind of boring work, but knowledge work, dealing with spreadsheets and all that. And now everything is done by ChatGPT, or maybe you're a call center employee in some country like India, and now everything that you used to do, maybe it costs $10 for the company, but now it costs 10 cents for it to be done by ChatGPT, and it's more efficient for the customer, and it takes less time. So how do you see this playing out? This is one of the ethical concerns I was just thinking about. I mean, there are some solutions like UBI, Universal Basic Income, and things like this, but how exactly do you think it's going to play out? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Do you remember, guys, when we used to have GPS? Like a GPS, like when you rent a car, you used to pay like an extra $5 to get a small GPS piece that you placed on it. And now with smartphones being so advanced, we don't need that anymore. So, I mean, my answer would be, we're changing, our world changes, and we're just going to have to adapt. And yes, some works will disappear, and some some works will be paid less. But I'm pretty optimistic, actually. I think we're going to adapt by somehow humans still playing a significant role, but working not as hard, and hopefully not being less smart, because that's a concern. But I'm actually pretty optimistic.
So Yafit is looking at me because I have a little bit more of a pessimistic, in my past.
Yeah, she's my Waluigi.
I've done bankruptcy for 6 years, big chapter of cases. I've read science fiction books for 40 years. Like, I have a slightly more pessimistic take on that. I think we need to take active steps. This is clearly another industrial revolution we're facing. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's more than, shall we let cars start filling out our roads instead of horses? I think this is a very big deal, and I think we're going to have to take actual steps to make sure that people don't get dumber, which is not a random hypothetical, but an actual thing. So going back into the GPS example, there's been empirical work that has been done testing the brains of taxi drivers in London, and they split them into two groups: those that were using GPS systems and those that were navigating on their own. And literally every day, you saw new neurological maps being developed in the brains of those that were navigating on their own versus the ones that were using GPS and were just basically, there's a thing called death by GPS. I don't know if you've heard of that term, someone driving off a cliff or into a river or into like a water fountain. These things happen all the time, and someone reports about them in the news like it's a funny anecdote, but we do this all the time, right? And so I think we're going to have to figure out ways to actively make sure we don't get dumber, that we keep learning and developing, even if we are using other tools. So yeah, we might not, we might all be using calculators all the time, so to speak, right? But I think this is a concern, and we need to be mindful of that and train ourselves to do more things, new things, be able to better supervise AI and find purposeful things we can do to improve our lives, also harvesting the extra free time and advantages that generative AI has to offer.
Yeah, I'll quickly just add, because you mentioned India, that there is a digital divide when it comes to these tools. Because, for example, I don't know if you guys know, but in China, ChatGPT, OpenAI did not make ChatGPT available in China. And it's one of the hottest commodities right now, selling on, I think it's called Baidu, like their Chinese Amazon. You can buy ChatGPT login, OpenAI login. You can buy it just like you would go to Amazon, and it's priced pretty high. Like, it's not available to everybody. So what we're getting here for free or for relatively small amounts of money, people around the world have to do a lot to get access to. So yeah, the digital divide in terms of ethical considerations is also really concerning. Yes.
A colleague playing around with ChatGPT asked it, how do I make a Molotov cocktail? And they want to know if you think that might be reported to the Department of Homeland Security.
If you think or if we think? Did ChatGPT ask you if it's going to be reported, or do you ask us if it's going to be reported?
I'm asking you if similar questions would be reported to the Department of Homeland Security.
I mean, right now, if you'd Google that, you'd pretty much get the same result, and I don't think that it's being reported. So I wouldn't use it necessarily in a different way. But we've been hearing, we've spoken about generative AI that could predict what you're thinking next. So if that actually starts materializing, and there are new studies coming out of Berkeley and Japan, and that would be maybe a game changer, right? If they could predict where you're actually going to go with that versus just like a Google search or an OpenAI search of something that could be harmful but is not necessarily.
And I mean, if you followed Snowden in 2013, you know that many things are reported to the NSA from search engines. So I suspect definitely we're going to see the same kind of reporting mechanism happening with ChatGPT and other generative AI.
You might be interested to know that apparently ChatGPT advised him to be nonviolent.
Advice to you. Okay, thank you, ChatGPT. Yes, where? Oh, yeah, okay. We'll get the mic to you soon. Yeah.
So I don't really have a question, just more of some comments about ChatGPT, just someone who's very interested in AI and whatnot. First, it kind of seems like, so I'm a senior here at Baruch, so I have a strong foundation of actually like thinking in school. So, and with that kind of outlook, the way I see it is that it's kind of like natural selection, right? Like anyone who uses ChatGPT for an essay and actually expects an A and a degree off of ChatGPT, again, natural selection, they're going to get caught. I know I, just as an experiment, I copy and pasted a simple multiple choice question for my homework. Like I had the answer already, just to see what ChatGPT would say, 4-question multiple choice. It got it wrong 3 times before it finally gave the right answer. And it was basic economics, so like freshman level stuff, so it was,
Here's a question for you though. What if your professor actually created the multiple choice exam using ChatGPT, and that's stored in there? And it asked, write me 10 questions. These are things that are happening. Write me 10 questions about credit scores, multiple choice answers, let me know which answer is correct. Then you'd get the right answer.
Yeah,
because it's already stored and saved.
It's kind of dicey with that, but I feel like just to kind of wrap it up, like my big concern with ChatGPT and AI is before university level, and I'm speaking on the education perspective, right? So high schoolers, middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, where you're having these children who have iPads, iPhones, these smart devices. And the fact that they even know that a tool like that exists at such a young age, even if their parents block it on the network and stuff, the fact that they know it even exists and that they can use that, I feel like that's kind of a discussion that we need to have as well. It can't be forgotten, because that seems very dangerous, right? Like the fact, again, like that they even just know about it seems very dangerous.
I always tell this story about my daughter. She's 12 now, but when she was 5, she asked me, Mom, is there a God? And I'm an academic, so I will give her a nuanced answer with different approaches. And as I was starting talking, she was really patient for like 2 minutes, and then she was like, Emma, can you just Google it? So I guess today she will say, hold on, I'll just ask ChatGPT. Maybe she wouldn't even ask me. So yes, I definitely see your
I agree with you too.
Yeah. Do we have the mic? Oh, okay. And then I think we have more people here that need the mic.
I just want to draw you both out on something you touched on earlier. I was talking to a doctoral student at another community college this morning, and I said to him, the topic of ChatGPT came up, and I said, I don't know what it would be like to be a professor now. Plagiarism was bad enough at the dawn of the internet age. So my question to you is, aside from having all of your students take pen and paper tests and submitting all of their papers by hand, what software is there? I know there's software out there that compares styles and can detect plagiarism. But now, can ChatGPT, will it, do you think it will, outfox the software that is designed to outfox possible cases of plagiarism? And how would you, as tech experts and professors, try to counteract that, if in fact there's such an answer?
100%. From what I've read yesterday, and I was looking at different plagiarism software, plagiarism detection software, they are not doing a good job in detecting. And that was with ChatGPT 3. I'm not sure what's going to happen now with ChatGPT 4. What I should say is that OpenAI is really concerned about that, and they say that they will create some kind of watermark that you'll be able to know that this is an AI-generated text. But I'm not sure about that as well, because then you can just, I don't know, create it on your phone and type it. So it's going to take longer, but it's still going to be something that you copied. So,
or just tweak every other word and make it be a little.
Yeah, or tweak it. Yeah.
Is it working?
Yeah.
All right, we're good. Thank you. So I work for an estate planning attorney, and I showed him ChatGPT, and he drafts wills, he drafts powers of attorney, and so on. And I'm like, okay, let's ask ChatGPT if they can make a simple will. And like we asked him, and it worked fine. He's like, yeah, but that's easy. And then we added a bunch of like complicated provisions, and they're like, there's no, like, it's not possible for this to happen. And then it made a great will. Everything was included, the names, like the artwork, everything we included. And my question basically is, what is some advice you give to someone in this field? Because most of his work is essentially drafting documents. It's all transactional work. So what would you say to someone like this who's worried about his job?
It's a real challenge. I think you'd have to figure out ways to, if it's boilerplate stuff, it will be outsourced to, straightforward, simple, low fees, or maybe even potentially free, right? I would say if there are any issues, people want to be covered. They want to know that they have someone they could talk to, someone who's like liable and responsible, and if anything arises, they're there. So I think the differentiating factor would be A, if there's a little bit more of a sophistication, and B, if there are any issues, who do you speak to? If it's completely decentralized and you just did it all by yourself, do it yourself style, you don't even know what problems could happen down the road, right? So I think you'd have to kind of market that as, if there is anything out of the ordinary, we'd be there for you, and also we can give you a better, bigger, more broader outlook of what's happening. But I think the straightforward boiler stuff, it's going to be hard.
Okay. We have one more? Yes.
So I work in the technology field for public sector as well. So I just wanted to kind of quell the fears of ChatGPT. The fact that some of us, I've tried this, right? Write me a short essay, 300 words about different public housing policies. And they gave me policies that do not exist. But I just want to say, the fact that it generated something that was readable, believable, and actually presentable and understandable, that's proof that ChatGPT itself is working as intended. It doesn't guarantee you that the content is actually correct. Exactly. So the danger comes when you apply the language model to an actual database. For example, if you give ChatGPT the internet, like Bing, that's when you have the wild night with Kevin Roose happening. So that's one point. But what I'm actually interested about is, do you guys have any insights or knowledge of what is the public sector doing? How is the government trying to regulate and govern AI, specifically from just how to clean up the data that goes into AI, how to open the black box, and then how to I know it's very kind of broad, but any efforts that government is doing? Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, they're still trying to understand what crypto was and how it collapsed, right? So they're always a few steps behind. They've been using the Department of Homeland Security, for example, have been using in the last several years bug bounty services. They open code to have people catch problems and offer rewards. So there's some of that happening, but I think it's a big question, and they're just still not even in reactionary mode, to be honest with you.
I do want to say, though, that I think governments around the world, especially in Western countries, have been aware of the dangerous aspects of AI and have been discussing it. But it was in a more kind of theoretical form, and what we see right now is AI in the hands of each and every one of us, and many startup companies using the AI interface from ChatGPT to create various products. And this is where the concern turns from theory to practice. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. But it's fair to say that most governments that we know of, like European government and European states, and also here in the United States, we've both been writing and researching around AI and the risks associated with AI, many of which we discussed today, since 2015, 15. So it's not new. We knew about it. Everybody knew about it. But it was less, like, it was not in our face the way it's now. And I think this is why we're going to see the discussions turning, one, more urgent, and two, more concrete about what we should do. Okay, do we have time for more, Rocky? No, we have to cut? Okay, everybody, we have to cut, but Nizan and I are here for questions. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day.